What is up, friends, YouTube and motorcycle enthusiasts? This is Accelerate coming at you, and we're going to rebuild the carb on the DR200. Let's get after it. Alright, my friends, I've committed a cardinal sin. I let the DR200 sit with old gas in it for too long. It's been cold, we haven't been riding the bike, I haven't really had a chance to start it up. So whenever I did start it up and got it running, it was overflowing with gas, which tells me that there's corrosion, there's something in there that will probably make the carb overflow. So I said, you know what, I want to get a rebuild kit and rebuild the carb, because it sat for a fair amount of time even before we got it, just because it's 2016 with 412 miles. So this bike has sat a lot, probably not with ethanol free fuel either. So whenever I rode it last time, it was messing up. So step one is going to be to remove the carb itself. So this is a little off cuff here. I've already removed the carb, but it's actually really easy on the DR200. What you have is the manifold, the inlet, and then the airbox side. So I have the carb here. You can see on the airbox side there's this spring that holds the piece of the grommet onto the airbox. All you need to do is take that spring and pull it back, take the clamp off, and you'll be able to, and obviously loosen this clamp up here, you'll be able to literally pry the carb out. The only thing that you have to do before you do that is, one, disconnect the fuel line. Obviously the fuel line connects to the carb. And two, disconnect the throttle cable. The choke is already retained into the carb, so that's already taken care of. This is super easy. You just got to bust that nut loose and then push the carb, the throttle plate open. This guy slides out where the little nub is, and then once you get the cable loose, you just literally back it out and unthread it. You can see it spins. Once you get it off the carb, try to keep this nut where it was previously. Marking it's a good idea, because when you put it back on, it'll be in the same place, because this is where we take the slack out of our cable. So that's pretty much it for the carb, for getting it off the bike. You don't have to take the seat off, you don't have to take plastics off. It's pretty straightforward. Oh yeah, and that little guy over there, which goes on the back side. Nothing to it. So let's get after the carb and see what we got. Alright, so this is the rebuild kit that I purchased. This is the Mikuni MKBST31 120. So this is a Mikuni carburetor. This is an OEM Mikuni rebuild kit. I didn't want to fool around with anything else. I don't know what I'm expecting whenever I open this thing up. I know that it's overflowing, so at a minimum, the needle valve is probably either got a piece of debris stuck in it or corrosion that's keeping it from closing and overflowing. Now you probably noticed that I do have a filter on the tank. I highly recommend that. Pretty much any bike that's carbureted, put an inline filter from your tank. You'll save a world of problems. What that filter won't save you from is corrosion from either ethanol, gasoline, or debris that was in there in the tank before you put the filter on. So you can't really help from that. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to tackle the fuel bowl first. The diaphragm's on top. You just set it upside down. You can see here I've already taken a couple screws out, so I'm going to take the rest of the screws out. We'll look at the float needle, and see what's going on. Alright guys, I've got the screws out. The bowl can pretty much come off easily. Just two quick tips for you guys that haven't really taken a carburetor apart before. You want to use a screwdriver. This is Old Blue. This thing works awesome. So whenever you use a screwdriver to take the screws apart, you want to secure the carburetor and make sure you give it nice firm pressure. If you think the screws are going to strip for any reason, just stop. One of the things that a lot of people do is they will replace these screws with Allen keys, Allen screws. The fuel bowl is one of the things that you can access without even taking the carb off of the bike, usually just by spinning it. So if you have a problem there, it's easy to get to the fuel bowl. So definitely also you want to have a clean work surface. You know, you'll notice I've got little paper towels down. Everything's clean overall. My bench is pretty clear of clutter. I got tools on one side, I got parts on another. That's one thing you want to do. Clean environment, and then take your time. If anything feels like it's going to strip, These carburetors, they're cast aluminum. They're not, nothing should be really tight, but if they're old, they have a lot of corrosion. So enough of that spiel. Let's get this lid off. All right, this is what we're working with. I can see a little bit of corrosion and gumminess, but look here in the bottom of the fuel bowl. Oh man, grossness. We got dirt and stuff hanging out. So ultimately that corrosion and that crap got in there somehow. So it's coming in through the inlet from the gas tank essentially. So as it builds up in there, obviously the jets and stuff are trying to pull that fuel through. So this is all bad stuff. If you guys don't know, this is the floats, which are 100% frozen. And that, my friends, is why I'm overflowing. These floats should be loosely moving, and they're not. More than likely, the corrosion from the old gasoline has it stuck in the needle valve. Yeah, these are, these guys aren't even moving. That's crazy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this apart, clean everything, and we should have a nice, I should be able to tap on these floats, and they should just bobble, as there's a needle valve underneath that keeps everything from overflowing, right? It seals the gasoline from the bowl. So I'm going to play with this thing, and I will get back with you guys and let you know what I did. All right, so just a quick update. I wanted to show this before I took it all apart. So the floats, they are moving now, and it's because the needle itself, you see that little pin underneath there? I literally pushed it down. It's gummed up, it's corroded. So that should be on a spring, which would make the floats come up and down, and then we have a stopper on the back. So I've definitely found my problem. So now I just got to take it all apart, clean it, and fix it. All right, so to get the float off of or out of its position, you essentially have to get this pin out. So this pin, you need to drive it through the back side. So what I do is I use one of these little picks. You put the pick perfectly in there, give it a tap, make sure you're supporting the carb, and then this pin comes out. It's still in there pretty good. Yeah. It's hard to even do with one hand. Yep, and then this guy comes out. We set it aside, and then our floats can be removed to reveal the totally jacked up needle valve, which will be replaced. Yeah, it's got a little bit more spring in its step now, but it's going to need to be replaced. Now, one thing you will see what people will do when they have a sticking float, or if the bike's either running super rich, which means the float's sticking open to allowing too much fuel in, or they can't get enough fuel, is they'll actually take a screwdriver or something and tap the bottom of the carb, right? So they're tapping the carb, hoping to, if there is like corrosion or whatever, they're hoping to break this loose so that there's movement and whatever's happened. Sometimes you can, if there's just a little piece of debris in there that's keeping the needle valve from closing completely, it breaks that loose, and it, you know, either sucks through or moves out of the way, and then you don't have a problem. You don't have to take it apart. However, I'm getting calls here. However, if you suspect corrosion or haven't taken the carb off for a long time, I highly recommend just taking the carb off. That way you can clean everything up like I'm doing now. So we're going to get this old beat up needle valve out of the way. We're going to clean everything in the float bowl. We're going to want to use carb cleaner. So I have some carb cleaner from, you know, parts store, whatever. We're going to use carb cleaner, brush. So for brushes, I use either a toothbrush for basic stuff, or if there's a lot of corrosion on brass, I will use these light metal guys, or a nylon brush. So either one to basically clean everything up. Now another thing I'm going to do is, once I get everything soaked and clean and all that jazz with the needle valve out, I'm going to blow compressed air through this stuff. So compressed air will help make sure there's no blockages. These carbs, this is off a DR200, as you guys know. These openings in the jets are very, very small. So if the jet is corroded beyond what carb cleaner or whatever can physically, or well, can eat it through, then you may need to physically run wire or something really small through the jet itself. That's where we want to like look at it and make sure that at a minimum you can blow air through it. So I'm going to look at everything, clean it, and then we'll move forward. Alrighty, so I got most everything cleaned, and everything's looking a lot better than it was, for sure. So before I blow air through this thing, so this is the bottom side, right? This is the float bowl. Before I blow air through the jets and whatnot, I'm going to go ahead and take the top hat off. As many of you know, this is the DR200 is a 4-stroke, so this is a 4-stroke carb, which means it will have a top diaphragm. So I went ahead and took the screws out, again being very ginger, securing the carb, making sure I'm holding on to it. And then what we have here is the cap, which will have a spring attached to it. We just set that aside with the screws. And then we have this diaphragm that is attached to what we would call the secondary slide, where the needle is, right? So all this good stuff is down in there. So our kit will have a replacement rubber diaphragm. I inspected this one. It doesn't look bad, but obviously I'm still going to replace it, which these screws will come off and then it'll go back in together. Another thing that will confirm whenever you put it back together how it goes back in, you see there's a little dip. You can see it right here in the O-ring itself. There's going to be a little divot on the diaphragm itself. That way you know it goes back in that direction, in that way. So now that that's off, I can set it aside, and the carb's pretty much pulled apart. I'll clean all this in here, and then I'll blow air through those jets. That way there's no trapped air, nothing. I'm not busting the diaphragm inside the carb or anything like that. So the carb, for the most part, is pretty much disassembled. There's onesie twosies probably hanging out. The kit's going to come with all new hardware and as well as gaskets, and I'm going to use all that. As I blow it out and clean everything, I'm going to reassemble with what's in the kit. The main thing that the kit has is the new needle valve and then the new gaskets. The screws and things like that, it's not really that big a deal. But if you do have a screw that's stripped, a perfect example of that is on the bottom of my float bowl. The screw is here to drain the gasoline out of the float bowl, which is what you really want to do if you plan on the bike sitting for any amount of time. You just drain the gas out of it. You cut the gas off, run it dry, and then drain the bottom of it. That way you don't have all that sediment and stuff sitting there in the carb. So that screw is stripped on mine. If my kit includes a new one, it'll be awesome. If not, I'll replace it separately. So in any case, I'm going to get with the cleaning, and then I will reassemble, and key stuff I'll stop and show you guys along the way. Alright, we are moving right along. I found some interesting things that I wanted to make note of. So first of all, I noticed that once I got into the kit and opened everything up, there is not a new diaphragm for the secondary. So if your diaphragm is damaged, then you're going to have to reach out to Mikuni and get a different part number. So not included with the rebuild kit. It kind of sucks, but mine's in good condition. There's no issues, there's no holes or anything like that. So that's good. So the second piece is I noticed that this is the float needle. We have a housing, an O-ring, and a little filter that sits on the bottom. So this is actually 3 pieces here, because this little guy right here just sits inside, right? This is the actual needle itself. So make sure whenever you're assembling it, that you put all 3 back together as they were. And then we also have a new retaining screw that comes with it as well, which is really cool. Again, you know, this is why there's a breakdown of everything. The diagram shows it. Everything's pretty straightforward. It also gives you an itinerary list, as well as, if you look here, the fuel screw, right? So the fuel screw is what I was dealing with before. So this guy right here sits in there. I wasn't going to replace it. I thought, nah, I better take it apart, and I'm glad I did, because look here. There's the corrosion that's on this spring right here. So the corrosion that's on this spring, and then also I did not see an O-ring setting in here. It looks like, based on the corrosion, there has been something sitting there, but for the life of me, I can't find the O-ring, so it may not have been assembled with the O-ring, but we do have the O-ring here. There's also a small washer that I have to put on as well, that this guy is sitting right there. So again, it's important to follow the diagram and take your time. That is the key, going slow. Another great thing that I noticed is I have a new drain screw for the bottom of my float bowl, which is awesome because mine was stripped out. So overall, the kit's pretty decent. A lot of replacement hardware, some specific replacement stuff, but again, does not include that diaphragm. So if you're having trouble with your secondaries as you rev out the bike and it's either falling on its face or acting weird, that's definitely a target area to look for. I blew everything out. Everything went really well. Got everything all cleaned. So I'm going to continue with reassembly, so I can get it back in the bike. So moving forward. All right, couple notes. Again, I'm putting the fuel screw back in, which is this guy right here with the spring, the fuel screw, and the washer. So they definitely articulate the correct order, which is important. Another thing is I didn't think I had an O-ring or washer. It was down in there. So it was hiding from me. It was hard to see. I got my headlamp out and started using my my pick to see if I could move some things around, and sure enough, they revealed themselves. So just for another heads up, if you guys don't have like a pick set like this with different stuff like that, a mechanic's pick set, super handy, especially when doing anything with O-rings, cars, carbs, stuff like that. So in any case, I got the fuel screw back in. Now, one thing I did notice is that whenever I first took it out, it wasn't seated completely. So it is threaded, as you can see here, because this is the old one. So what I did was I counted the number of times that I backed it out before it stopped. So basically it stopped. So when I put the other one back in, I'm back into the correct number of turns. So I don't have a service manual for this bike, and so otherwise I would just be guessing of where the fuel screw is supposed to be adjusted to. So I don't want to take the car back off, so it was 12 turns out to get it to where it was basically just loose, and it would fall out of the hole there. So I put the new one 12 turns back in, so I think I'm in a good spot. All right, gang, moving forward. All right, float bowls are back in, nice and free moving. So those are going to work great. Time to put the fuel bowl back on, and then I'll flip it over and do the hat. All right, my friends, the carb is back together. Fuel bowl's back on, top hat's back on, diaphragm's good to go. Everything seems to be clean and in order. So I'm just going to go over real quick the parts that I replaced and what I didn't use from the kit. So starting at the bottom, obviously the O-ring for the fuel bowl, that was an easy one, that was replaced. The needle valve, the housing and the O-ring and the screen, this 4-piece combo here was replaced with the new one, and then the screw that holds the needle valve, get out there, the screw that holds the needle valve into place was also just replaced with the new one because it's nice and shiny. So the bottom of the fuel bowl, again, mine was stripped, so it's great. The drain screw is what it is, so that was replaced. So this is the spacer that sets under the secondary's needle valve. So that needle has a spacer underneath of it, that was replaced. The fuel screw, which is the screw, the washer, the spring, and the O-ring were all replaced. Same number of turns as what was in it in the OEM. And then the top hat screws were also replaced with the new ones. So what I didn't replace was there's a spacer and a clip on the needle itself. I did not replace those just because they were in fine condition. They weren't cracked. There was nothing wrong with the plastic. I didn't want to take it off and risk bending the valve, or the needle rather. And then finally, the fuel bowl screws. These 4 nice new shiny screws I did not use. And the reason why is because the OEMs actually come with, if you can see it there, a lock washer that's attached to it. All of the heads of each one of my screws from the OEM were in good condition, and they had the attached lock washer. There was no way to get the lock washer off without maybe trying to damage the screw or getting new lock washers. So I just reused the old ones. So I'll keep those and set them aside. That way, if I ever have to take it apart again, I will at least have it if one of my screws starts getting weird. So now it's time to basically reassemble it in reverse order. And as I mentioned before, with the DR200, you can see the plastics, the tank, everything is still on there. I just got a nice gap to where this this plastic bezel, or rubber rather, is going to go back in the airbox, and then I'm going to work to get this end back on the head and make sure it's sealed. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but honestly I can't complain. Like, not having to take the seat off or the plastics or anything else, should be good to go. And I should have a bike that starts and doesn't flood with fuel, which is exactly what was happening before. So let's get it back together and we'll see how it does. Alright guys, that wraps up the carb rebuild on the DR200. I put ethanol free fuel in there, about a half a gallon with some stable, and then I turned the gas on, filled the fuel bowl, and then it fired right up. No more leaking, no more sticking float needle, everything is all good. Rode the bike around a little bit. It's running a little bit lean, and that's one of the things that I kind of wish I would have done, is change the jetting while I had the carb apart. But the good thing is that if I want to change the jets, I can simply rotate the carb, take everything apart here, rotate it, and then just change the bottom, the main and idle jet. So overall, it should be pretty easy to rejet it, which I'm going to need to do. These bikes, just everything runs really lean. You know, a lot of things, if it's not a race bike, it's gonna run lean. This is obviously a dual sport. My wife's KLX 140R also ran lean until I put the cold start jet kit in it. But it's all good. Hope this was informative for you guys. All you guys out there with DR200s, enjoy it, keep rocking. Until we see you next time, stay on 2 wheels, rubber side down. This is Accelerate once again, signing off.